Hello and welcome to Monday Night Therapy. It's a special night. Wait, it's with John and Todd. And this week we have with Paul Koch, the author of No Place Like Nebraska, Anatomy of an Era, Volume 1 and Volume 2, the guy that wrote 890,000 words into two giant books that could be used as murder weapons. I have this special lighting just for Paul. And do you feel bad that I didn't ever do it for you, Todd?
I'm trying to find you in there, John. You're kind of hidden. Oh, now you're moving enough. Yeah. Hey, you know what? The best thing that's happened, John, is that it's warm enough that I could go outside without a winter jacket on down here in kind of like southwest Iowa and eastern Nebraska. Are you still cold up there?
Actually, it's 34 right now, so
Ooh.
it's a heat wave.
Heat wave.
I mean, it's you could go outside in just your underwear and be like, yeah, all right, we're rocking out, man.
Only in Minnesota
Paul?
can you go outside in your underwear. Paul could go outside in his underwear every day.
Yeah, he could.
No comment.
Yeah, Paul, I didn't introduce you. Well, I did. I did the short introduction. You live in San Diego.
Yes, been out here for the better part of 25 years, I believe.
So how is it there?
You know what? It is typical San Diego weather, about 73, 74 degrees. Just another crappy day in paradise.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
the place I would give anything to be able to live is in San Diego.
Well, you can buy Paul's house for $6 million.
No, I can't. I can't.
Well, you know the funny thing is, Todd, it seems like half of Nebraska lives out here already.
I'll bet they do. Well, shoot, the last time I was out there for a convention and, right there in the Bay. And I just love it down there by the Gaslight District and whatnot. It was just really, really cool. So I'm out there wandering around and I headed back up to my room and I flipped on my computer and checked Facebook. And here I see a picture of a guy posted on Facebook by that statue of the sailor bending the gal over and giving her a
yeah, the Embarcadero.
You know that? And I had just walked past that like 10 minutes earlier. And a friend of mine had taken a picture with him and his wife right at that statue. And I thought, he just posted this now. Is he in San Diego? So I pulled out my cell phone and I dial him up and I said, John Johnston, are you in San Diego? Well, yeah, I am. I said, well, I am too. So go figure. I don't know what this attraction is. He just can't leave me alone, or his wife.
That is awesome. You've got a stalker.
Yeah, I do. You don't want to hear me talk. Let's talk to Paul, John.
Yeah. Okay. So, Paul, you were in Nebraska from 1987 to 1996. You were a member of the strength and conditioning staff of the greatest Husker teams ever in the history of mankind.
I happen to be in the right.
How often do you tell people this on a weekly basis?
It's funny. Every now and then I will enter a conversation with a stranger and just happen to mention those years. And the first thing people say is, oh, wow, Tom Osborne, or they'll say Tom Osborne, Tommy Frazier, Lawrence Phillips, and they'll just harken back to watching the national championship game. I don't know which game, but they'll harken back to watching the game and say, wow, those guys were amazing. So
tell us what your role actually was. I mean, strength and conditioning. The only thing I know about strength and conditioning is, I played high school football. When I became a junior, I started lifting weights. And when I was a senior, I was amazed at how much easier it was to just go out on the field as an offensive guard and beat the hell out of guys that were 70 pounds heavier than me because they didn't lift weights. That's all I know about it. I mean, we had generally just standard equipment. What is strength and conditioning? I mean, what did you do? Just tell us some of that stuff.
Oh boy. Well, I started in '87 I was a walk-on volunteer student assistant strength coach. So I actually worked a year or two without even getting paid. But and before that, I even tried walking on, believe it or not. I played some 8-man ball in D2, Petersburg, Nebraska, the home of the Petersburg Pirates, now defunct. But I tried walking on, and I found out I was a 2 player.
A
Uh,
two-player.
do you know what a two-player is?
No, I've
I mean,
never heard that term.
too small, too slow. So I then got the idea that hey, you know what, Boyd Epley, this guy has some things figured out, and if I aspire to greatness, I might as well just kind of latch on to somebody and figure out what it is, what they do, and how they do it, and maybe supplement my college education. And I bothered Boyd Epley for the better part of a month or two. I would write letters. I'd phone in. I'd show up in the offices just unannounced. And he finally gave in, and he gave me a job out at the Bob Devaney Sports Center, working with Brian Bailey, who is the Olympic sports strength coach out there. And so I assisted Brian. We were working with basketball teams, the track teams, wrestling, swimming and diving, track and field, gymnastics, golf, even the cheerleaders, you name it. And then a year or two later, Boyd called me up, and I went over to the West Stadium and started assisting with football over there. And then later on, I took on pretty much, I was head of the Olympic sports, all the sports I just named, in addition to the Nebraska volleyball team. So I was quite busy, and then pretty much just part-time, I was working with the football team during those years. But I spent a lot of time in the weight room, so I got to know a lot of those guys really well. And it was just a great era to be around Nebraska athletics.
So, I mean, you worked with all these different sports. Were there, do you have to come up with different stuff for swimmers versus football players versus volleyball players versus, I mean, you had to understand all the mechanics and the sports, right?
Yes. When you get down to it, strength and conditioning first is about injury prevention. That is just square one. Prevent the injuries. But then if you develop enough strength, you develop enough power, when these athletes do get injured, they're just going to recover that much faster because they have the strength base. Okay? And lastly, you're just talking about performance enhancement. You just want to develop an athlete that does things more powerfully, faster, more efficiently. And if you get enough people on enough teams doing that, you're going to be successful. But yes, you have different movement patterns. You have, more importantly, you have different types of conditioning that you need. You're going to condition, an 800-meter swimmer differently than you can condition a 100-meter sprinter, or even, an offensive guard.
Right, exactly.
But at its base, you're just trying to get kids as healthy as possible and strengthen up any weak links that could show themselves, dangerous or deleterious down the line when they really get into the action.
So, I mean, did Boyd come up with this stuff? Did you come up with this stuff? I mean, are these standard things the Greeks knew about years ago when you stole all their stuff, or what?
To be honest with you, Boyd, we're talking about like 1968, 1969. Boyd was actually a pole vaulter on the track team. And he was recruited out of, I think his family was originally from Omaha, but then they moved to Arizona, but then they recruited him back to Nebraska, so he came on. And Boyd was, I guess he'd been a weightlifter from the get-go when it wasn't cool to lift weights, when it wasn't in vogue, when people didn't realize there was actually performance aspects. I think at that time, weight training was looked at something like maybe a circus act would do, like a strongman or something like that. And the story goes he was over in the old Coliseum in the basement, I think it was, or maybe the Schulte Field House underneath the old stadium. And they had an old universal rack and a few free weights, and he was messing around and he ran into a few football players who happened to be injured. And he just started, chatting up a storm with them and started lifting. And next thing you know, a few weeks later, then they came back in the field. Of all people, assistant Tom Osborne, noticed that these guys were stronger, faster, and better than when they got injured. And so Tom actually went on a vision quest per se, and he hunted Boyd down. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing with these guys? What's going on here?" And Boyd thought he was in trouble at first. And Tom said, "Hey, you know what? I have an idea." So one could actually say Tom Osborne birthed the godfather of strength and conditioning. And Tom then arranged a meetup between Boyd and Bob Devaney, and found the budget dollars and pretty much gave Boyd free rein and say, "Hey, have at it. Let's build something here. Let's develop something."
So
And
I got a question for you.
yeah.
When you were there, and you said you worked with the volleyball program, were you working with Coach Pettit or Coach Koch? Who was, or both of them, or did you?
Coach Pettit. Coach Pettit was the coach at the time. Yes.
So I'm kind of curious, when we hear about strength and conditioning, I think a lot of us, have, at least some kind of a perception that you have like the head person that's in charge and then some assistants that work with the various teams. What kind of contact did you have with head coaches? I mean, how engaged were head coaches in the program that you were responsible for?
It ran the gamut. You had some coaches that were just looking for any edge and to try to get up on the competition and the Big Eight. We're talking about the Big 8 days. That's how old I am.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, some coaches, they were willing to really go out on a limb and try some newfangled thing. Others were a little hesitant. I remember I worked with the baseball team also. And usually just at the beginning of every summer, I used to go to John Sanders, the old baseball coach's office, and just beg him to put the guys through the paces of some weightlifting. And John used to say, what the heck, just have them go run a few miles. They'll be good, And just a few years later, next thing you know, Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco and the boys are juicing up and they're jacking taters left and right,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it ran the gamut. But for the most part, the Nebraska coaches that coached Avani originally and then Bill Byrne had in place, those people all had a really good understanding of just what the strength and conditioning program could do for their kids. And it was often, it would shock you, it actually shocks me, how many potential recruits I would talk to during the course of the week. When coaches would bring the recruit in and I have to explain the strength and conditioning piece of what we offer the student athlete. And then on top of that, then they really jumped on the nutrition portion with Dave Ellis when Dave came on.
Right.
Yeah.
And trust me, Dave, he is a world-renowned authority. And when Dave speaks, people ought to listen, and he really breaks it down for the kids. And I think our recruiting really picked up when Dave came on too, because he helped bring in a greater caliber of athlete that were really serious about what they were doing.
Wow. All this stuff just seems so, I don't know, like it always should have been there. You know what I mean?
Well,
it just seems like something that is so evident, so, I'm missing the word, obvious.
Yeah, it seems that way, John. But you know what? If you go into my book, Dave Ellis, in his interview, Dave, trust me, Dave has been a lot of places, talked to a lot of people, worked with a lot of different organizations. And Dave himself made a great point. He said, you know what? It was just that specific time. Most coaches, they come in, and what are they trying to do? They're just trying to develop a culture in their program. They're trying to get just a few things straight. A lot of times, they're just trying to get on the same page with their own assistant coaches.
Right.
And sometimes that's just terminology, much less scheme and strategy and in the heat of the game, getting both brains working on the same wavelength. You know what I mean? And it just took just incrementally, year after year, where Coach Osborne to finally get things in place where you can finally start looking at those next pieces that really kind of put things together. And that's when you really see your players shine and maximize their full potential.
Have you seen what's happened this year?
With
Matt Rule has 39 people or 40 people on his staff.
I read that the other day. I think the number was 40 or 41.
Yeah.
And I think that might put us like the top one or two of the Big 12, what is it? What's it called? The Big 16, BG one. Yeah. I don't know what
it's the
Big 10.
The
Big. I expect it to be a Big 16 someday. I don't know how it's going to come about, but I think it's going to be the Big 16. But yeah, hey, you know what? Again, what little I know about Coach Rule, it sounds like he gets it. And with all the kids you've got, with all the athletes you're working with, the more staff members who can help build a culture, who can, sit down and talk with an athlete and make a connection, not just on the field, but off the field. The more people you have doing that and what's the word? Maybe promulgating your culture you're trying to build, the better, man. And the more support staff, the better. I'm all for it.
You got anything, Todd?
Well, the one, yeah, I want to hear him talk about his book, but one other question that I did have is, for quite a few years now, and with different coaches, they talk about how important the strength and conditioning staff is in establishing the culture. I mean, because of the contact that you have with the student athletes. And I guess a question I kind of have is, I understand if we're just talking football, I understand that from, the winter conditioning perspective, because you guys are the ones that are there with them day after day after day, motivating, pushing, and that type of thing. And I guess, I'm assuming you agree that you help promulgate the culture, but talk to us about how that works. How does that happen? What are those relationships like when you work with student athletes in that kind of a setting?
Boy, well, I think it was John, in your video a week or two ago, you alluded to Trev Albert's interview where he said Coach Osborne, in his wisdom, he put together a staff of very, I think the word disparate is the word, just of differing personalities,
Right.
And I think when it comes to like a strength staff, you got the same thing. Okay. I look at it this way. When you have a kid come into a weight room, they're a college kid, number one. What would they rather be doing? Most of the time, it's just about anything but being inside a weight room. Okay. So to me, and again, this is me from my perspective. Okay. Somebody might look at me, another strength coach, and say, this guy's a kook. Okay. But another might say, hey, you know what? This guy gets it. And from my perspective, when a kid came into a weight room, you wanted to just remind them of three things, or just focus on three things. Number one, lifting weights is work. And your job is try to make work fun. And sometimes you have to get creative. And but just, hey, in some way, shape, or form, make the work fun. Number two, you do want to motivate them to get the most out of the time they're there. Because number one, it's hard enough to get them in the weight room. Number two, when they're there, you really got to make it pay. Make it worth their time. And we always actually had a time clock. We didn't want our athletes spending more than 45 minutes in the weight room. We felt that if you gave them 45 minutes and in a workmanlike manner, in a disciplined manner, if they followed the program we set forth for them, they could do their entire workout in 45 minutes. And then they could go on with their day, and they could do homework, and Lord only knows what college kids do. But here's the deal. The funny thing, and the third thing, obviously, is to make just like I said, an interpersonal connection. And some of these kids, they just want to know someone understands them, that someone cares about them despite how they perform on the field. Okay. And believe it or not, Brian Bailey, again, my mentor, in his interview, he makes the great point of so many of these athletes, they're very afraid of failure, and they're very fearful of making a fool out of themselves on the playing field in public. And it's really, just from that aspect, it's a high pressure situation, and you just want to be an encourager and be an ear. And sometimes they'll vent to you, problems they're having with their girlfriend, or problems with a coach, or whatever, but to me, the key was you just always had to let them know, hey, I'm here for you no matter what you need. And that's just, you have to start from there. Everything else, you just kind of depend on the program, and you do the work. And but speaking earlier, you guys asked about where the weight program came from. I think most of the credit goes to Mike Arthur. If you're familiar with the name Mike Arthur, Mike was a long-term assistant to Boyd Epley. You have Randy Goebel in the background also. Randy actually had he was a handy guy. Randy could build just about anything. Okay, so here you had Mike. This guy was delving into lifting routines and stuff from like Eastern Bloc nations, from like the 70s, and he's delving into like arcane journals and textbooks and grabbing all this stuff out. And believe it or not, hey, Nebraska football itself took a while to get on the straight and narrow, get on the path to really knew what it took to condition a football player. And about the early 90s, I think they really kind of stepped it up a notch, and we really started training the movement systems, the energy systems properly, instead of just doing a circuit type of thing during winter conditioning, and the guys got really aerobically fit. We found out that, hey, you know what? Football's not an aerobic activity. It's usually short bursts of speed,
Right.
anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 seconds, and next thing you know, they're standing around for a minute. And the old, what do they call it? The Krebs cycle, right?
Yeah.
You got adenosine triphosphate here, and you got oxygen there, throwing off acid here, and the whole thing's going around. And you just have to, by the time football season comes around, you have to make sure you have enough strength, as much power as possible, and then condition it so that these kids can just go full force all day, every day. And that's what our guys did. Our guys actually, they did put in more work than we asked them to. We had many guys, they'd sneak off to Gold's Gym that night. They'd sneak over to the Student Rec Center. They would, they'd actually, Brendan Stye was famous. We always had to turn the lights out on him and turn the stereo off and say, get out of here, go to the training table. Training table's going to close. And he'd be screaming, I've got 2 more sets left, or something like that. But yeah, these guys put in the work, and the championships that they came home with was proof that it paid off.
Okay, we're gonna pause and go to chat. Linda Wilkins is one of our regulars, and Linda Wilkins has a daughter. And wait a minute, it was the son's girlfriend, wasn't it, Todd?
Sorry, Linda. I drank your beer, Linda, but I forgot the relationship here.
Okay, she has. I thought it was her daughter or something. Anyway, they're running a 7 marathons in 7 days, or 7 half marathons in 7 days, on every continent.
Wow.
And Linda gives us an update, and she says, John, Todd, quick update. 6 down, 1 to go, still on the way from Brazil to Miami. There was a big issue going out of South Africa 12 hours late. This will be the 2nd marathon today. Have you ever heard of this? Have you ever heard of this, Paul?
That is madness.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
That's what I think.
Hey, all I can say is get your rest and get your protein, man. Your body is eating it. You run that many marathons that soon, your body is eating its own muscle.
Oh man. Okay, we're going to ask. Some of these are going to come up, and we're going to show. Let's see. Fred Sacco, was creatine that big a deal for the '90s team? It felt like we always heard about it. I tried it, and it didn't seem to do much. Now you're going to be giving out nutrition advice, so you have to disclaim. I am not a medical authority.
Well, you did it already, so thank you much for that, John. I do recall when Dave Ellis came on, he did introduce the team to, I believe its official name was creatine monohydrate, and we did it with just a select few players at first, because we wanted to see how their bodies dealt with it. And one of the keys to the creatine was, number one, you didn't want to take too much. Okay, you wanted to chase it down with a lot of fluids, because I think if you do creatine monohydrate and you don't, it sets yourself up for some cramping. And the last thing you want to do is inhibit performance rather than help performance. But yes, we did use some creatine monohydrate, and a lot of people, I think they put a little too much focus on it. My perspective, the way I looked at creatine monohydrate, it was like having an extra 8-ounce steak at the end of your meal. It just kind of bumped you up that little bit of extra protein and such, that at the end of your workout, you might get maybe an extra 1 or 2 sets out of it when you're pushing to failure. And, obviously those last 2 sets are actually where all the improvements come about from, right? So if you've got someone that's willing to push a little extra bit and use that creatine, hey, all the power to you. I myself tried it, and I'm still a shrimp.
Okay, we got Blaine Cole from Japan. Mr. Koch, do you have any thoughts on PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs? Do they have a place in any sports in any form? Keep that in mind. And we're going to go with Joel Tilson saying, is the Big Ten and other conferences testing for PEDs, performance-enhancing drugs? Thanks, Doc. Before you answer this, I think there's this constant thing that, guys can't just go into, put it this way. One of the guys from my high school, who was two classes below me, came and played football at Nebraska. And he was a sophomore when I was a senior. He was our scout team quarterback. I mean, honestly, I used to beat the shit out of him. Then I saw him walking toward me at Nebraska after he'd been on the football team for like a semester. And I was like, oh God, what has happened to I mean, he literally looked like he could have torn me in half with his bare hands. He looked like he looked like the same guy. He just looked like he could, I don't know, knock down a building, pick up a car and throw it at me. And, there's so many people, I think, that have this attitude that this can't be done by just working out, or this can't be done by, like what you do with strength and conditioning. And so we look at steroids, we look at performance-enhancing drugs. Sounds like a big umbrella of, we just throw it in there and I don't know what it is, but it's doing something and they're getting bigger and stronger. So going back to that, Blaine Cole, thoughts on pads? Do they have a place in sports in any form? Go ahead with that one.
Wow. Well, I come from the school of if you can't do it naturally, don't do it. To me, it's kind of like the old, what do you call it? The old Olympic, the spirit of the Olympics. You show up and whatever the good Lord gave you, you make the most of it. And at the end of the day, as long as you did your best, that's what matters. But it sure would be nice to win. That's the perspective I always took from it. Obviously, there are some sports where that's not the case. I'll be so bold as to go out there and say, Tour de France, the bike racing. You talk about
right.
the PEDs. That's a whole nother animal right there. But as far as football goes and PEDs, I think, well, from the stories I've heard, the 80s, that's where things really got crazy. But anymore, while I was at Nebraska, we were always testing. We were always looking out for kids trying new things. And most of the time, if someone was trying, like anabolic steroids, things like that, there were usually somebody that was maybe fifth team, sixth team, fourth team, and they wanted to make the jump to maybe the second team, And if you suspected something, you usually sit them down and say, hey, that's not the way to go about it. And but from my perspective, it really doesn't have a place in football. My concern is always the long-term effects. You're talking
right.
biology, you're talking biochemistry, and the human anatomy, the human machine is quite a complex machine. Just I challenge you just for 15 minutes trying to run your liver, okay? Much less the rest of your body, and look at all the different things that have to happen automatically in your body. It's impossible. So my perspective is don't screw up with it. Just work yourself hard, rest hard, eat right, and train well, and you'll get to where you're going.
Okay, we got James Marshall. James Marshall says HGH, human growth hormone, is the difference maker. It's expensive and will bring about big performance increases. Paul?
Well, all I can say is it sure the heck probably ups your home run total. Right? I'll just no more comment after that.
Oh, wow. Let's see. Wait a minute. Somebody did respond. Brian Bauer said, in response to my guy that was from my high school, did he want to tear you apart with his own hands, John? You know what? He was a really nice guy. He was one of the nicer guys that I can remember. He was a nice human being, certainly nicer than I am, and I'm sure that he never wanted to tear me apart.
What year would this been, John?
I graduated in '80, so he would have been '82. He played defensive back. He got on the field. I don't think he played tons, but he performed well. I mean, I think he picked off a pass that sealed a game for us one time.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, in his defense, I would say, we've all heard of the freshman 15, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? If you get a kid who probably hasn't trained weights before much in high school, okay, who maybe didn't have the best nutrition available to him, who maybe just didn't slow down, didn't rest as much because you're a young kid and you're going. you're a freshman in high school. You're put on a great strength and conditioning program. You're eating real well at the training table. You're finally reaching a spurt in your growth in the third place and maturing. Hey, that freshman 15 for the right kid can turn into a freshman 40.
There is truth to that, and I gotta preface this. I'm not talking about my current body mass, but when I graduated from high school, my last wrestling match, I wrestled at 145 pounds, and I went off to college, and they put me on a strength and conditioning program from my first day on campus there, getting ready for the upcoming season. And when I came back at Christmas, and people saw me, they just could not believe the difference just in that short amount of time with the amount of muscle that I'd put on my body. And I never saw 145 pounds after that either. I wrestled at 158 pounds. That was my weight when I was in college. And so it did make a difference. And that was all natural. I wasn't, dabbling. So
he was doing bicep curls with 145 pounds the last time he saw that, right?
Yeah, that the freshman 15 was there. It's not the 50-50 that 50 plus 50 that I've gone through the last few years. So.
Okay, we're halfway through. Paul, I'm going to show a photo, and I'm going to ask you to talk about this, okay?
Okay.
This is a photo. In the caption, this is a photo of Dick Vermeil and Lawrence Phillips. And the caption says, Paul, thank you for all you did to get Lawrence this far. Coach Vermeil. You want to talk about your relationship with Lawrence Phillips?
Oh, man. Well, first off, you know what? It's kind of funny. I remember I must have been, what was that? Maybe the 1981 Super Bowl that Ron Jaworski and the Eagles. I'm trying to think who they played. Did they play the Rams? Who was that? Anyway, I remember as a kid being an Eagles fan, and I remember Dick Vermeil, and I just thought he was the bee's knees, And years later, he gets back in the NFL, and anyway, a few years ago, after Lawrence had passed, Lars Anderson, Lincoln-based writer, I believe he's now teaching at the University of Alabama. But Lars at one time wrote a great article about Lawrence Phillips. I think that was right before Lawrence's junior year. And anyway, they put together a show for Showtime, and I can't even remember the name of it now. Running for His Life, maybe. But anyway, in the course of that, there was a photo of Lawrence, and after a Rams game. It looked like Coach Vermeil was giving Lawrence the game ball for a wonderful performance. And just the look on Lawrence's face of, it's almost like a fatherly pride in Dick Vermeil's face, embracing Lawrence there. I just love that picture. So I contacted Lars and I asked him, hey, how do I get this picture? I just want this picture for my wall. And he said, hey, no problem. He said, I'll do you one better. You want Dick Vermeil's phone number? And sure enough, I think I may have sent him an email, and he was kind enough from Vermeil Wineries, from Vermeil Vineyards. He sent me an autographed picture of that picture of him and Lawrence, and just a real, just a prince of a man. And I guess what, he just got into the Hall of Fame a year or two ago, didn't he?
I think so. I think he did.
I believe he did. Anyway, just a class individual. And but yeah, Lawrence. What do you want to know about Lawrence from my perspective?
You stayed in touch with him when he was in prison, is that right?
Yes, I did, and through a very curious set of circumstances. How do I put it? I found out, I didn't even know he was in San Diego here, at a local in the local jail, awaiting a hearing, and here it was Thanksgiving. I was just going through a divorce myself, and I thought, you know what? How lonely can he be in a prison cell? As lonely as I am here, just sitting in in my place on the couch. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can make his day. So I actually arranged, sight unseen, a visit to him in jail. and I think it was the day of or day before Thanksgiving, and walked in, and obviously we hadn't seen each other for the better part of probably 15 years, and it took him a few seconds to realize who I was. But we sat down and just had a really nice, probably like an hour-long conversation. And I myself, I was pretty shocked because I believe most of the time that you only get to spend like 20 minutes talking to an inmate. And the guard there, after a while, told me, he said, "Hey, you know what? Lawrence doesn't have a lot of visitors, so we really appreciate you being here." So they gave me an hour with him. And thereafter, we just kind of we started a letter writing campaign, just became pen pals. And I'd write him a letter one week, he'd write me a letter the next week, and we pretty much we did that religiously until his unfortunate passing.
So go ahead, Todd.
Lawrence Phillips, occupies a certain place in Nebraska football history, and kind of most people look at it as a tragic story. And I guess, what I would like to say is I honestly, when I watched that guy play, and I got to see him play live a number of times, and I got to see him from different angles, and I'm not sure I ever saw a running back that could move horizontally and cut and like he did. I mean, Nebraska's had Heisman Trophy, Mike Rozier, Roger Craig, Tom Rathman. I mean, wonderful, wonderful running backs. But it's hard for me to think that I ever saw anyone, maybe Barry Sanders, that was a better running back than Lawrence Phillips. I mean, he just was amazing, and it's unfortunate all the rest of it caught up with him. So.
Lawrence had all the tools. Coach George Darlington, the book, talks about, and again, George, he'd been with Tom since 1978, something like that, 1976. He said Lawrence, and he brought up Roger Craig. He said the two hardest working running backs we ever had were Roger Craig and Lawrence Phillips.
Wow.
And there are, weave throughout the book are a number of players speaking on Lawrence. And I would say 95% of the time when the conversation turned to Lawrence, they would be just glowing references of just friendliness, of work ethic, of character and decency and love. I mean, it swims against the current of kind of what most people know of or hear of Lawrence. But I found him to be just a bright, brilliant young man. I mean, you won't believe what he read in prison. I know when he passed, he was reading Nietzsche. Okay, and I'm just let's just say I'm not a fan of Nietzsche in case he had anything to do with Lawrence's mindset at that time in life and what he was going through. But nonetheless, no, Lawrence, great guy. And like I said, we'd share letters, once a week back and forth. We'd talk about the football game was on recently. We're talking about the Pelini era. We're talking about the Riley era. And every now and then he'd get to see a portion of a game, or he'd see a game on TV. And, he'd have some comments to say. And, or, he'd see somebody on the sideline and like, oh my gosh, there's old Coach whoever. I can't believe they're still around type of thing. And, but no, it's just, it kind of breaks my heart. It's actually been almost exactly, it's a week or two past, I believe 6 years, from his passing. And, he was just, he was a good man. Rough early life. And you know what, some people are able to move past things like that, in life. And some people, they struggle. And Lawrence did have a few struggles that I think were a result of some of his childhood. And he did his best, to overcome them. But, hey, you, me, anybody, if you go through some stuff, you're gonna draw some lines in life that you don't want to cross. And you won't let people cross, and set some good boundaries. And Lawrence had his boundaries. He didn't like being disrespected. He didn't like anyone disrespecting his friends. At the same token, he didn't like to participate in tomfoolishness and getting into trouble just for trouble's sake. Most of the times I think he got into trouble, he was usually defending somebody, believe it or not.
You know,
So anyway, I'm
this
sorry.
is cool. Honestly, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but this is really cool. This is what I'd hope I'd hear a little bit. And I guess I'm going to be selfish here, and ask, you obviously have talked to so many players and other people associated with the program. Who's another player out there that maybe the public persona was 180 degrees different than what that person was really like?
Oh,
This
boy.
is the telltale part. This is.
Yeah.
This is the memoir, Prince Harry.
Is this going to get me a Netflix special?
Yes, this is your
Okay,
Netflix
okay.
special moment, Paul. Dish the bad things or whatever.
Hey, I do have to piggyback. You were talking about Lawrence. Lars Anderson was talking to Nick Saban, okay? And Nick was standing on the sideline when we went down to Michigan State and just tore them a new one. I think it was the first game in 95, right? And Nick Saban told Lars, he said, you know what? Lawrence ran past me with the ball one time. He said it was the first time I've ever heard the wind when a player ran past me.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. You think of that, and don't tell me that was a special running back. Okay. Anyway, that being said, you know what? Gosh, I'm trying to bring up some dirt on somebody.
We don't need dirt. We can flip.
No,
it.
I'm just joking.
No, it's dirt. Come on, dirt.
No, I'm just kidding. No, you know what? Well, the funny thing, again, John alluded to it in his nice little video, his little synopsis of my large book that I put together. Darn. Oh, we talked about a meeting in like early 1992, I think it was.
Right.
And Boyd Eppley went in front of the team right before winter conditioning, and he wanted to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. And he wrote on the board, jerks, want to be's, and have to be's. And we got rid of the jerks, okay? Because if you have a kid on the edge of being a have to be player, I have to be here, and I want to be, sometimes it's a jerk that'll drag you down and and help you make bad decisions off the field. Stay at the bar an hour later than you should, or cut corners. And if you're doing a drill in winter conditioning and you're racing against your buddy, are you going to cheat to make him look bad and look slow, or are you going to give it the full effort and do it the right way? Do it the right way right away, right? And but yeah, we kind of it's kind of about getting rid of the jerks.
Paul, you just described me in college to everybody else that was around me.
Well, I think they call it addition by
an hour later than you should. 2 hours, 3 hours.
I think they call it addition by subtraction.
I mentally would go, yeah, we're going to go do this because I know that I can at least outrun 3 of these people when the police come.
It's like that. It's like the story a guy and a few buddies out hiking, and all of a sudden a bear comes out of the woods. And what does the one guy do? He kneels down. He starts tying his shoestrings. And his buddy says, "What are you thinking, man? You're not going to outrun a bear." And the guy says, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you."
Yeah, see, one of those guys was always Todd. Okay, I have to ask, did anyone, this book came out 2013? Yeah,
yes.
2010 years ago. Did anyone regret their interview? Did anyone, want to take anything back?
Oh boy, slightly. I would say I did an interview with Phil Ellis, linebacker, and Phil, his memory wasn't quite what he hoped it was. He did misname a name when talking about an event, and in later years, this person who was named contacted me and said, "Hey, man, that is a total misquote. It is not true. I want you to retract it, blah, 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 do whatever." And I said, "You know what? I will do exactly that." So I got a hold of Phil, and Phil said, "Hey, man, you know what? I probably," he said something like, "Hey, I was a linebacker, man. I got my brain rattled around a little bit. I probably did get a name wrong. So if you have to change it, go ahead and change it." So there are actually 2 editions of the book out. There's one pre-revision and post-revision in that. But but nonetheless, it wasn't even what was it? He was talking about an accusation of something that happened against somebody. It never did happen, but just even the accusation, the player didn't feel right about it. And
I get that.
Yeah. Oh, there was also another one. Someone misremembered. It might have been. Oh gosh, they were talking about down in the pit. It was the offensive line going against the defensive line, and the story. Somebody told the story that Christian Peter had ripped a helmet off of a tight end and was banging the guy over the head with the helmet. And I got an angry email from this player saying, I can't believe you put that in print because it's exactly the opposite way around. He said, I've been telling people for the last 20 years it was me ripped the helmet off his head and I was banging him with the head on it.
Oh my God.
I'd like to see whoever was smashing Christian Peter with that.
Oh shit.
It was warfare.
Where did you get the idea to do this? I mean, how did this come about in the first place?
Oh boy, you know what? I got the idea. It must have been about 2007, 2008, and I've been reading a few business books, and one of them I mentioned in my book was Good to Great, written by Jim Collins.
Right.
He was a Stanford professor. And I read this book, and I put it down. I closed the back, the back cover, and I thought to myself, oh my God, this guy, in many respects, just defined Coach Tom Osborne's Nebraska football of the '90s era. And I waited. It just kind of rattled around my brain for a year or so, and I thought to myself, you know what? I don't think anybody is ever going to delve into just how special those teams were, and how special all those athletes, how special those kids were, and the coaching staff, everybody, just how unique that era was. Because to be honest with you, and you guys both know, and I think Charlie McBride used to say that before the season, he'd say, "Hey guys, here's the deal. I'm not sure what kind of team we're going to have this year, okay? Because at the bottom line, it's dependent on you guys. You can assemble all the talent you want, but unless those guys get together and they kind of make a pact and have the motive and the discipline and the camaraderie and looking out for your brother, and not make knucklehead moves on and off the field, good things aren't going to happen." And I think even Coach Dan Young or Milt Tennifer mentioned that this was a very special. Coach Tom Osborne mentioned it. This was a very special group of kids where you didn't have to do a lot of motivating. They had it, and it could be a nature-nurture thing, okay? Coach Osborne, I believe, firmly believes it was nature. You didn't have to nurture a motivation in these kids. Those coaches just did an excellent recruiting job, and they brought in some guys that were achievers, and they put in the work and more. In the book, we talk about a minute 16. I'm not sure if you're at all familiar with that refrain. The old Florida State national championship game where we were up by like 1 or 2 points with a minute 16 left. We thought we had it in the bag, right? Byron Bennett is backpedaling, shooting pistols down the Florida State sideline, saying, how about that, suckers, And
he was saying shit fire, that.
I wanted you to say it. I didn't want to say it, John.
Yeah.
But no, you know what? I mean, man, you talk about heartbreak. These kids wanted to be the very first kids in order to give Coach Tom Osborne his first national championship. And it was ripped, right out of their hands. And man, that stung. And even, you know what? I was thinking about that this morning, how that happening, a lot of people in life would probably crumble and they'd go into a victimhood mentality and, oh, woe is me. And they would just kind of sulk for, who knows, maybe the rest of their lives for getting that close and not getting it. But these kids were just a different level, and they took it to another level or 2 or 3, and they used that as the grist to push them to even greater heights and greater performance and greater dedication. And it was a special group of guys. You see anybody from those teams walking around town, you know what, shake their hand. And I myself, I'm inspired by that. Okay. And I don't know why you guys watch Nebraska football. Okay. We all watch football for different reasons. Some people just
A
say,
mental illness, Paul.
hence the therapy, right? Monday night therapy.
Yes, that's why we're here.
Well, I watch football, and I don't care what kind of football it is. I watch football to be inspired. I look around every corner for inspiration. And to me, there is no sport on the face of the earth that inspires the average Joe to greatness. Just by witnessing the striving, the thriving, the fight, the perseverance, the dedication, the teamwork that it takes to be successful in the game of football. It's the greatest sport on earth. I tell you, I coach my son's.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I coached my son's flag football team. Believe it or not, I'd gotten out of coaching for the better part of about 24 years. Okay, and all of a sudden, he wanted to start playing flag football. So I thought I would be the geriatric old dad sitting on the sideline in the lounge chair, watching some young buck run up and down and teach kids, the fundamentals and have some fun running around the field, only to find that there was no coach assigned to the team. Yeah. So I became the coach.
Right.
Okay. And you know what? It brought about, man, I forgot what it was like, how fun it was to be coaching kids. And it's just, there's something about it. Football is a great game, man. And it's the perfect sport for Nebraskans to watch, because man.
I'm going to be unfair to you, and I'm going to ask you this.
Okay.
When you've watched Nebraska football, in the past 10 years, so we're not just bundling under one guy. What do you see? When you look at Nebraska football, what do you see?
Oh, boy. What do I see? What do I say or what do I see? There's a lot of four-letter words. No, that's just a joke.
We usually reserve those for me.
Well, you know what I saw, believe it or not, the last 10 years, if you want to say 10 years, I saw kind of like what we described earlier. I saw a coach trying to get a culture set up. It doesn't matter what coach. Trying to set a culture, trying to make the players themselves accountable to each other. And I saw them in the process of just doing some really wonderful things sometimes. And you could see this gleams of like, man, we could have something here if they put it all together, But at the same token, you just looked like every now and then there'd just be a knucklehead where he'd lose his discipline toward the end of the game. And next thing you know, it turned into 3 or 7 points for the other team. And that made all the difference. Maybe in a nutshell, I just say, man, we were just so close, so often, for so long. And that's for those little things. And that's for those extra 40, 41, all those staffers probably make a difference, So I'm like I said, it was a frustrating 10 years, but you know what? You really don't enjoy those winning seasons unless you've been through a few of those losing seasons. Am I right?
Oh my God, no.
Hey. Hey, look at Alabama before they hired Saban. Okay?
Well, that is true. They did have Pat Dye, if I remember right. Didn't Pat Dye win a championship for him?
Yeah, it wasn't Pat Dye. That's Auburn.
Oh boy, they had Gene. They had. Did they have Forrest Gregg? I don't know. Gene Stallings.
They had the Shula kid.
Yeah.
Dennis Franchione.
Yeah, and hey, an even better name. Remember poor Oklahoma in the early to mid 90s?
Yeah.
I'm serious. Hey, you know what? Growing up as a kid where day after Thanksgiving, I'd be crying in a pillow because darn, Keith Jackson and Billy Sims and J.C. Watts and Buster Rhymes, they'd always bring out some freshman running back. Some freshman who would pull out some magic and just break your heart. And next thing you know, they went through the Barry Gibbs. Was that his name? Barry Gibbs?
Barry Gibbs was the car salesman.
Okay. I didn't know if he was a BG or if he was a Sooners coach. But anyway, those years, man, Oklahoma, I felt so bad for them because, man, they slipped,
Yeah.
And truth be, I didn't like having Colorado as our main foe in the Big Eight. Okay, I like having Oklahoma as our foe. And when Colorado kind of usurped Oklahoma for a little while there, that really that wasn't any fun. Okay, but that's just my perspective, right?
So what do you think? We got a new coach coming in. He's got 83,000 people working for him. I mean, give us your impressions of the beginning of the Matt Rule era, so we can use them against you at a later time.
Oh, use them against me. Well,
That's
you
how
know
this
what?
goes.
Okay, I see. It's going to be archived. You know what? To be honest with you,
Think of me as your wife right now.
oh,
Okay, that's kind of
okay.
creepy. Don't do that.
Well, I'd just be saying, yes, dear. Whatever you want, dear. You want that purse, dear? That is your purse. Go after it. It's all yours. Whatever makes you happy. You have whatever purse you want, John.
Okay.
You got that?
It's an odd time right now. Okay, impressions of Matt Rule.
You know what? Number one, he was a defensive lineman in college, right?
I think so, yeah.
He was a walk-on.
Yep.
Okay, that's 2 stars on the lapel already for me. Okay, anyone willing to be a walk-on, and again, who knows how Penn State treated their walk-ons? Okay,
true.
But for him to run that crucible, and supposedly he was a senior on the team that missed out in the national championship when Nebraska won it, right in 94, 95. Okay. It looks like he learned his lessons, okay, and obviously he's a great football coach. I meant learn lessons, I mean by some good coaching mentors over the years, okay?
I thought you meant learn these lessons like left that frickin' Penn State behind and came into Nebraska, the 2 national title holders.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
No, you know, to be honest, I'm sick of having my heart broken, okay? And I fully thought that Scott Frost and his crew would be, that they got it. They knew the Nebraska way, and they'd be the ones to get us over the hump and back on the right path. So to me, this is Captain Kirk and the Enterprise taking off to lands unknown. I have no idea where these guys are going, okay? But you know what? They have my full support, and it sounds like their heart's in the right place. It sounds like there's some real go-getters. I love the fact that they're going back into Texas because, man, Texas has some good football players. They have some good kids. And every great team Nebraska's had, from my perspective, has always had some good Texas players on it because they bring something, recipe. You talked about recipe a week or two ago, John. They add something to the mix. You got Nebraska kids. You've got Texas kids. If you're lucky, you have a few kids from New Jersey, okay? They bring something special. I don't know what it is. Jersey kids, man. They bring something special to mix. And everybody else comes together. And you know what? Big things happen. So, hey, I'm Coach Rule. Him and his staff, they have my full support until they don't.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, closing remarks. Todd, do you have any closing remarks?
Do I have any closing remarks?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I've enjoyed listening, and I could do this all night, listening to some of these experiences and stuff because, obviously, John, you and I were on campus, from 1981, for me, 1985, to you, 1992. So we got to experience, those early days, the Turner Gill days and Mike Rozier and Irving Friars and those kind of guys. But obviously we were really interested in the program, after we left. And once Paul was there and some of the things he got to experience, I'm jealous. I'm jealous because of the close contact that he was able to have with football players and teams and coaches that, I just love cheering for. So.
Well, I was blessed beyond measure to be there at that time. Okay, because just like you said, the kids there, the coaches there, it was a very unique time in history. And not to just push my book, okay, but I wrote the book as if you're maybe sitting at a bar and you're eavesdropping on someone having a very deep conversation about some of their fondest memories of those times. And so a lot of it is like fly on the wall kind of stuff, and kind of pulls back the curtain. And and you'll hear there are a lot of funny stories in there about just kids being kids. You know what I mean? Because hey, you know what? They're athletes. They were students at the same token, and well-performing students, I might add, because of our academic skills and counseling and everything. But no, it's if you have a chance, I would urge anybody grab a book. I don't care if you buy it used on Amazon. Okay, I don't know what fool would actually sell his book used on Amazon, but nonetheless, maybe he found a different doorstop. I don't know, but any regard, I would say whether it's volume 1 or 2, grab it, do some reading. You are gonna find just nuggets of hilarity, insight. And you know what? You're probably going to walk away very proud to call yourself a Nebraskan. Wow. And I wrote the book, so Nebraskans would be proud, because a lot of people look at it as flyover country. But you know what's home to me, and there's some very special people come out of there, and there's some very special people that still live there. And we need to celebrate who they are and what they do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
Oh my God. Are you going to move back and run for governor or anything?
Well, it's been
not a chance.
Wonderful talking with you, Paul, and listening to you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us, Paul. So this has been Paul Koch, author of the book Nebraska, No Place Like Nebraska, Anatomy of an Era. We might have him back. We'll see how things go, because we have so many guests lined up for the years to come.
Hey, all I want to say, John, you know what? I am proudly sporting, I think, the only John Johnson autographed Coronation t-shirt in existence today.
That is true. That is true.
So that ought to get me at least one extra guest appearance episode, don't you think?
I think so. I would say at least one.
We will come up with tougher questions. Actually, we'll solicit questions from the audience. All right, we're past an hour, and Todd and I are old, so typically we end this as an hour. Is there anything else, Todd? Anything else?
Oh, no, I can't think. I'm just excited for baseball season to get going. I really am. So,
you know what? Wednesday night, for everybody listening, Wednesday night at 7 p.m., we will be doing a live show with Patrick Ebert of D1 Baseball, and we will be talking about Big Ten baseball. We're going to do that in place of our regular Five Heart podcast this week. But Patrick Ebert writes for D1 Baseball. He's a national writer, and we're going to go over the Big Ten. Are you going to be there, Todd?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, probably. I've got such a busy social life, John. It's just, sometimes kind of hard to fit everything in.
Well, you have to be there because I can pronounce your last name, and otherwise... You need to learn how to pronounce Aaron's last name.
Aaron's last name? I just call him Brutus, John. I just call him Brutus.
Okay. All right. That's it for tonight. Thank you for your support. Thanks for showing up. Tell your friends. Like this video so YouTube likes us more. Here's how we end, Paul. Good night, Paul. Good night, Todd.
Good night, John. Good night, Paul.
Good night, you freaks.